Standing Councilman Corey might not be joining us. Several items on the agenda, and I don't want to jinx this, but there's no speaker cards. So not that you feel compelled to speak, but we'd love to hear from the public. We do have a guest here, and he is a volunteer, and I want to thank him for his presence. And joining us here in City Hall in Los Angeles, Mr. Eric Eisenberg. Please come on up. Can you read into the record?
Sure. Council members, item 2 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Eric Eisenberg to the Harbor Area Planning Commission.
My understanding it's a vacancy created by Camilla Townsend. And I want to welcome you, sir. We had a little chat right before this. Could you just share a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and...
Okay, my name is Eric Eisenberg. I am a resident of the Harbor area, and I currently serve on a couple of boards and committees. I'm an urban redeveloper by trade. I've been doing that for about 30 years, and I'm looking forward to serving on the commission. I think it'll be good.
As an urban developer, is it on a national level, a state level, or international?
Typically in a project area level. I specialize in historic rehabilitation, so I'll pick a project area such as Hollywood or the Harbor area right now, downtown San Pedro, and try to bring that particular area into economic sustainability.
Great. As an individual, we'll be obviously making a tremendous impact in our built-out environment. What would you like to see when you finish this experience, when you walk away? What would you like to see as you walk away? What did you leave behind? What kind of impact would you want to see?
When I walk away from the Harbor area or downtown San Pedro or Wilmington specifically, I'd like to see economic sustainability. I'd like to see people living and working within their communities at an affordable level. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see crime being reduced because of that, because people have jobs and a decent, clean, safe place to live.
Great. So obviously, as an urban developer, the skill sets are there, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And I thank you for donating your time and doing everything we can to make this city better. And Councilmember, any questions or observations?
No, just generally, not related to the commission appointment, but in your work, what is the key to revitalizing some of our historic corridors in the city? Some of our older neighborhoods that are struggling they have old mom and pop shops, and they would be great community areas for people to gather and residents and people to go shop and help faltering economies. But I've been struggling with this in some of my corridors in my district, and we have different approaches to different parts of my district. But I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts.
Well, in your district in particular, there are a lot of small stores that are family run. They're owned and operated by the proprietors, and they're competing in many cases against larger chain stores. So what they need to offer is actually something different. And what we all have to offer, no matter what business we're in, we have to provide as much service to the customer as possible. So it's difficult when you have an individual running a business and they're working 6 or 7 days a week, they're working 10 hours a day to actually think out of the box and think, no, I have to take it a step further. So it has to be an educational process for them to learn what they need to give their customers for their customers to feel special. Because generally speaking, when you're shopping at a mom and pop store, you're paying a little bit more for it. You're at a parking meter instead of a parking lot, and they may not have the selection. So it's an educational process for the retailer that they have to start to get into the mindset of the customer and understand how they can serve the customer without having a necessary financial impact to their bottom line per sale. They can't have a fire sale on all their merchandise. That's not going to help them.
And what can the city do to help?
What can the city do to help them? Educational processes. The city can do outreach, can meet with them and say, well, what are your problems? What are your goals? What's going on here? What's your biggest challenge? And just sit down and have a dialogue with them and make them feel part of the system so they don't feel like lonesome outsiders. And that's a lot of the problem with individual retailers. They feel like lonesome outsiders. They'll quit their job, they'll save their money, they'll open a store, and they feel like they're in it all alone. So to actually get them involved with the Chamber of Commerce, to get them involved with groups that are similar to themselves, whether they're Latino, whether they're Asian, get them involved in other business groups so they can get together and exchange ideas.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I'd like to recommend that we approve Mr. Eric Eisenberg to the Harbor Area Planning Commission. Have a second?
Second.
That will be our action of this committee. I look forward to seeing you in the city council.
All right.
And when do we expect him in the council?
It's on Tuesday, June 21st.
21st. We'll see you then, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much for your service.
Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. We'll just kind of run through the agenda really quick, and then we'll go back to the reports. But seeing no cards on 4, we can move to adopt on 5. We can approve and request the CEO to prepare a report within 30 days to any additional staff resources needed by the planning department for the Jefferson Park HPLZ. That'd be number 5. At 6 and 7, we can move on consent. If we can approve on 8, the applicant's request to withdraw their appeal, and that would take care of those items. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
That'll be the action of this committee. That takes care of those items, Roberto, and so that takes us back to item, go ahead.
Is there a report from the Director of Planning for item 9?
One more time?
The item 9, the Director of Planning's report.
Yes, I was about to ask him.
Okay.
You're too quick, Roberto. Now, I know you have a heavy schedule. Would you like to give a report now, or would like to go through the first 2 items? It's up to you.
I'll give you a brief report if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm Mike LeGrand for the record. We've had a busy week in the planning department. Since I saw you last, I was on a panel with ULI, Urban Land Institute, discussing transit-oriented developments, and myself, as well as Bill Roshan, participated in a number of panels that day. Our president of our planning commission talked to a lot of our colleagues in the development community and heard about some of the different ideas and trends going on around Southern California to try and entice development and affordability around our transit nodes. And so we're looking forward to a robust discussion as we start implementing more TOD plans and working on more plans following the Measure R lines, and hopefully partnering with MTA to do some sustainable communities around those transit lines and prepare the groundwork for Los Angeles' new rail system. In addition, the department, we've been very busy trying to keep up with not only the policy work we've been working on, the community plan updates. We currently have comments coming back on the environmental impact report for the Hollywood Community Plan, and the staff's diligently reviewing those and getting ready to prepare reports. And it's very important to note that on this community plan, we're actually, the staff themselves are doing the environmental impact report. So in-house staff is doing the EIR. We're not utilizing a consultant that would take ownership of the entire EIR. We're actually doing it in-house with the help of some assistance on the traffic issues, but it's going along very well. I wanted to mention some case filing numbers. In the month of May, the department had 237 applications filed. It's up from 193 in April, but down from the high of 2005-2006 of 594. So in 2005-2006, at the boom, we were receiving about 600 applications, and now we're down to close to 250. The applications that remain that we looked at, a lot of them tend to be use cases. So our zoning administrators has still been very busy, so we appreciate the council support in the budget to add 2 additional zoning administrators to the expedited processing section. That should help us with that backlog in that area. And then we also have a lot of major development cases, big projects that come through, so we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples in terms of one case, the amount of staff work that it takes. But we did see a little bit of an incline in our caseload, and hopefully we'll continue to see that go up as the economy improves. One last note, last night myself and a number of our planners were in South Los Angeles at Kings Park. We had a great tour of Kings Park by the community, and the South LA Community Coalition sponsored us there. We had a question and answer session with many of their members and the community at large, talking about nuisance activities in the area. We've held over 30 public hearings in the last couple of years to abate nuisance activity in the South Los Angeles community plan area, and we've had numerous success stories. And we toured a few of the properties and looked at some hotels, recycling centers, as well as existing liquor stores that we're going to be checking for compliance issues as we move forward. So we're looking forward to partnering with Building and Safety, the LAPD, as well as the city attorney as we start to continue to address some of the nuisance activities that are taking parts in many of our neighborhoods. That's all I have to report.
Well, it's quite a bit, but congratulations. I wanted to just ask one question. In terms of the restructuring of the department and how we've formed more of a team approach geographically.
Correct.
The level of work and how it's being handled. I don't want to hear a report on future changes, but given this one phase that you're going through since you came on board, how is that working out?
Very well. We've implemented what we call Blueprint 2010, 2011. We'll be doing a report back to the council on that shortly. But in a nutshell, we reorganized the department to be more effective and efficient and basically to do more with less. We're starting to see the fruits of that labor. The staff has really been engaged in that process. They've embraced the concept of one project for one planner, so every project has a planner work on it rather than having different sections of the department do the environmental, the site visit, the determination letter. Now one staff person handles all of those activities, and it makes it more customer service friendly, but also it helps the planners have a little more involvement in the case and ownership of the case. And then having our long-range planning separated from our case processing, we're starting to see that that's been working out very well in terms of the number of community plans as well as large policy work that's come out of that section. So we feel that so far it's working very well. We'll keep monitoring it and looking at our performance measures and adjusting as needed.
Great. So what was the total number that we lost in personnel? I know I keep using the term, the statistic of 40%, but what was the number of bodies?
Yeah, I don't have an exact number. 40% is accurate. I know through ERIP we lost 60 employees just through ERIP.
60?
Yeah, and through the overall we lost many that were just also vacancies we lost through many budgets the last few years. So we're down 40% of our total staffing from 4 years ago, which was appropriated, not necessarily they weren't all filled positions, but it was the positions we were planning on filling to accomplish our work program.
Great. Any questions from our director? No? Thank you, Councilmember. So with that, that's the report, and then we can move to item number 1, Roberto?
Yes, item 1, council members, is a presentation by the consultant, KH Consulting Group, Wolpert. It's relative to the development review process.
And we do have a presentation, I believe. And good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Honorable Chair Reyes, members of the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, and city staff and members in the audience. My name is Gayla Krage-Hartso. I am president of KH Consulting Group, and with me today on the Development Reform Project is one of our team members, Bill DeGroff from Wolpert, in case there are additional information or questions you may have for him as well.
Hello, Bill.
I had met with Plum at the start of this project 6 months ago. In April, we gave you an update, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the content of the draft strategic plan, which will be an official document to be released July 1st. Development reform, the intention was to develop a seamless, predictable, and transparent land development process. And the focus initially was to be on land use entitlement, public improvement permitting, and building permitting. When I met with you in April, I had shared with you that the input we had received from the development community and the residents at large from the neighborhood councils felt that it should have a broader scope. And so we began looking at some other areas in terms of the future of the city of LA and in terms of the community plans. I think probably the first question I should just put on the table, because it's the first question you asked me when I first met with you, is how is this process different from anything else that's been done in the city? You all, many of you remember the Dan Garcia report in 1995. You've read dozens of reports since 1995 on this topic, and I don't want you to feel like, oh my golly, here's one more consultant report, because truly this process has been a different process than the city has gone through before. How is it different? First of all, we're not issuing a consultant report. What we are issuing is a strategic plan, and it's all about change, implementation, and action. We also have had extensive input We've had over 200 people from the development community and community activist groups participate in 9 different forums around town. We had one follow-up feedback session on Saturday with Plan Check NC on the ideas coming out of it. We have another one scheduled for the industry group this Thursday. We've interviewed over 80 people within the city family. We've flow-charted 43 of the processes. We've identified 146 best practices. We've read 100 documents. And on the basis of all this, there were some 500 recommendations that we had compiled by the beginning of February that people felt would make for a better process. But again, you might say, how is this different? Well, I can tell you we had a development reform advisory committee of industry experts, and you can say, well, we've had that before. I can say we had an online survey where over 189 people responded and shared more ideas. And you can say, well, we've done that before as well. Probably the most fundamental difference is we took all of these ideas, and in March, April, May, we worked with 10 implementation improvement teams, and this consisted of over 100 employees. The teams were made up of very experienced people who have lived in the city. They know the rules. They are the senior veterans. They are the keepers of the traditions of how we have done development processes in the past. We had middle management people who bring stability. They're the ones who will become the future leaders, and they're the ones who will probably have to own the change that goes forward. And we also had a lot of new employees who brought new ideas and new energy to bear. So by involving over 100 people and also having a steering committee made up of the department heads from Building and Safety, City Planning, Bureau of Engineering, Department of Water and Power. In the last 2 months, we added Department of Transportation and CRA. We believe we have a combination of a top-down, bottom-up process where there are people who are generating the ideas in the bottom, there are people from on top helping to review them, sanctify them, and say, yes, these are the actions we want to do going forward. Now, when you do a strategic plan, you start with a vision. The vision we have proposed in the strategic plan is that LA should be the best place to live, work, and visit. And the development activities should help make that vision a reality. In terms of development services within the city of LA, which consists of more than 12 departments, they should help to achieve this vision through their being leaders in effective land use and development and delivering world-class and cost-effective services. So the mission is supportive of that vision. It's supporting transparency, predictability, and efficiency, to enforce code compliance to protect lives and safety, create distinctive, sustainable communities, and to enhance our communities through responsive, effective planning, building, engineering, and development services. We also worry about people. You can write a lot of rules and regulations, but unless you have some shared values, you're not going to have the outcome you want. There's been a lot of concern with what's the impact in terms of staff reductions, furloughs, early retirements, loss of expertise on the very employees. When we looked at development services, we felt it was important for us to define what the shared values would be. Each department has their values. These we felt should be shared across development services. In one of the work groups, which involved the ones looking at morale and how to work with employees, they started talking about, well, we need to work smart. We've got fewer people. We need to get our skills up to date. We need standards. We need to have consistency across departments. And as they talked about it, we'd also heard people talking about the need to plan smart and to deliver smart and to build smart. So we came up with a value system that's built on these concepts of plan smart, work smart, deliver smart, to build a better LA. And SMART stands for seamless, make it happen, because we know in the past the other efforts have not occurred. Accountable and transparent, integrity is very key. Responsive and responsible, and finally teamwork. Teamwork not just within your department, but across the various departments. All right, so how is a consultant report different from a strategic plan? Because what we are delivering to you is a strategic plan with 9 action plans. And the action plans actually delineate action steps and defines who should implement it, what needs to be done, what's the timeline, and how we're going to measure outcomes in terms of objectives and milestones. We've indicated what are those actions that can be accomplished in year 1 by the end of this next fiscal year, by the end of the second fiscal year, and what may take 3 or more years to accomplish. On a very high level, the first action plan talks about our communities. Originally, this was not within our scope, but the communities were very vocal, both the residents and the development areas, feeling that we need to do more to get our community plans up to date. So city planning, working with our team, the implementation improvement team, came up with the title for this action plan called Crossing the Finish Line. Their goal is to get the Hollywood draft community plan done and to get the other 6 community plans across the finish line by the end of this next fiscal year. The other strategic priority in this action plan has to do with shaping the city.
Can I just interject
Yes,
for a
yes,
second
yes.
there? And in terms of the community plans and crossing that line, inherent in that is the folding in of a whole range of stakeholders, including the community and the residents, and how they define their built-out environment in a manner that reflects their vision of their own neighborhoods. And in that context, as we move forward, as you go through this, capacity to perform more efficiently with more accountability, it's within the context of those community plans. And that's what I think is so important to emphasize, that is a significant step in having a sense of direction for the city through these community plans, and that's what you prioritize, and I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, it's very important. And we find that when we look at best practices, that those cities that have had more community engagement have had greater success in terms of any of these initiatives they embark on.
I'm sorry to intrude there, but...
No, please. I am happy to take questions as we go through.
Okay.
The second part of this first action plan is called Shaping the City. And this is looking at the general plan, the framework, and the elements within it. And when we looked at some of the elements, things like transportation or open space had been developed back in the 60s and the 70s, when we all know Los Angeles was quite different and was very car-centric. So this is an opportunity for them to look at what parts of the framework are current, what parts of the framework should be updated, and really come up with a plan to plan of what they can accomplish with existing resources in looking at that. The second action plan we call, it's related to policies and procedures, but more politely it's called Interdepartmental Resolution of Conflicts. Now what does that mean? Well, when we looked at the processes, we could streamline the processes, but one of the big stumbling blocks we found was there was no easy way to resolve differences on conditions across city departments. And every city department had a very good reason why they had imposed a condition on a project. Well, developers were often left in this catch-22 of how do we get this resolved, and no single city department had the authority to override one over the other. Now, everybody agrees fire is probably the one that will trump all other decisions. If they say the fire hydrant goes here, Department of Water and Power understands we're going to hook up the hydrant there. We're not going to argue with you that you really don't need that fire hydrant. But it's other issues where there's really no right or wrong answer. An example would be a project in Chinatown. The developer had 9 feet. The Department of Transportation said this is a flow-through street. We want that 9 feet to be made into a right turn lane to keep the traffic moving. Department of City Planning said, no. We really want this to be an ambulatory, pedestrian-friendly community. We don't want a right turn lane. We want a wider sidewalk. The developer's basically saying, I can do one or the other. I can't do both. They only have 9 feet. So what we are proposing is earlier resolution of these kinds of issues, and it'll be done in multiple ways. At the very front end, when this is almost at the pre-application stage, they would complete a planning case referral form. Bureau of Engineering would review it. It costs $125 plus a 7% service fee. And it basically would tell the developer or the project person, here are all the things on the street side you need to be aware of. We will also have a zoning pre-check so that when a developer goes to pull the permits from Building and Safety, there are no surprises. Probably the biggest component of this whole thing, though, is the Land Development Committee. This would be a new committee. It would be organized through the City of Planning. They would receive the conditions on a project. If there are conflicting conditions, they would talk to the departments to understand why. If it can't be worked out, it would be put on the agenda. Land Development Committee would meet once a month, and all of the decision makers would be there at the table. Planning Department would chair it, and this would define the 3D configuration that the developer could then build within. Another big component of, yes?
The Land Development Committee, that would be a multi-departmental committee? Or
It's
where
an
would it-
interdepartmental.
Interdepartmental committee, and I have these 2 pages here that I'm trying to follow. Did you have that here, or in any of these?
Yes, it's under policies and procedures, under accountable development.
Okay, and so where in the development process would this committee get applications, or?
It would be actually a process that city planning would handle. They would receive the conditions, and before it goes to hearing, it would go before the Land Development Committee. It would operate in some ways like the current subdivision committee currently works, and it allows us to have the forum of all the departments who have imposed conditions to meet and discuss them. There's a concept in government called syndicated decision-making or syndicated risk, and it allows intelligent, smart, knowledgeable people to come together and look at, do we widen this for traffic and put in the right turn lane, or do we do the sidewalk? We know we can't do both, but we need to make our professional judgment of what is in the best interest in terms of the vision of the city in the short and the long run.
Okay, I don't have that handout.
Does that help?
Yeah, a little.
A little, okay.
Yeah.
It would still then go forward from there with the conditions through the normal hearing process. So it's really a resolution of interdepartmental differences before it goes to the hearing stage.
We don't have that now?
You do not have that now. You have it for subdivisions. You do not have it for all other projects. So that was a gap we found in your processes that this change in policy and procedures could help close.
Okay.
And it would allow for earlier clarification.
Well, it's not in this chart at this time.
No.
Yes, it is. It's under policies and procedures. Is it not written there?
Policies and procedures.
See, resolution
Of conflicting conditions,
Yes.
zoning codes.
Yes. It's under resolution of conflicting conditions.
Okay,
That's
but
where the Land
there's-
Development Committee would
There's no
come in.
mention of that committee, though.
But that is exactly where it is.
But that's where it is, okay.
Okay. We can add those words to the chart.
Yeah, I was trying to follow, yes, I was trying to follow that, but it's not in the chart.
My apologies,
understand.
Councilman. I think the issue is we didn't provide the councilman with a binder to follow along the discussion on. So you're a little handicapped, Councilman Weezer. We're sorry. We're going to go upstairs and grab you a binder ASAP so you can follow along the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next action plan, number 3, is on zoning codes. And when we looked at the zoning codes, there's already good efforts that the City Planning Department is embarking on that have to do with zoning code simplifications. And you'll see 3 of them coming forth the next fiscal year. You'll see 4 more coming at the end of the second fiscal year. There's also desire that we heard from various stakeholders that they would like to have the codes available online. And in fact, we found out Building and Safety has sort of frequently asked questions handbook online, and we feel that should be made more widely available through the other city departments. But probably the biggest one is what we call comprehensive zone code reform. In the last time the city of Los Angeles went through any kind of comprehensive zone code reform was 1946. The world has changed in the last 60 years. And what has happened is when they started with a simple 800-page overview of the zoning code that was state-of-the-art at the time, it has now grown to over 800 pages. And the term we keep hearing is it's somewhat Byzantine today. So as part of our best practices, we looked at what did the largest 50 cities in the United States do about zoning code reform since 1995. What we discovered was 22 of the 50 major U.S. cities have gone through comprehensive zone code reform in the last 16 years. We think it's time for Los Angeles to embark on that as well. This is one where community engagement will be very important. Many city departments have migrated away from the old Euclidean form of zone code that was developed in the 1920s to a more contemporary 21st model of form-based, hybrid and contextual-based zoning. This is something where we took a cross-section of people within the city department. There's a lot of energy and interest in making this happen. But this initiative will take easily, in other major cities, 3 to 5 years, and in the city of Los Angeles could easily take upwards of 7 years to accomplish. CEQA is the 4th action plan. And this is really bringing a lot of the CEQA guidelines and thresholds that are at the local level to be consistent with the state, so there'll be less confusion and conflict with them. It's making sure the city planning department under their new blueprint structure are all current and kept up abreast in terms of the complex CEQA rules. The fifth action plan has to do with just general communication with the public about development reform, development services, coordinating across the various departments in terms who are involved in development services, what the shared message will be. We are also encouraging that there be commissioner training at the area planning commission. We want the city attorney to be in attendance, and we feel that that will help to resolve some of the issues that later become litigation issues in the future. I'm going to talk first about customer service before I get into process improvements, because the work culture was very key to us. If the work culture is not such that people are receptive to change, no matter how well written a consultant report is written or how well thought through a strategic plan is, it's very hard to drive the change if it's only top down. So this particular work group that worked on work culture was very critical. Probably the landmark customer service difference, biggest item in terms of interdepartmental collaboration you're going to see first will be launched officially in July. It was formerly called the Citywide Case Management Office. It'll probably be called Development Services Case Management. But this started out with something that had been developed a while back in terms of case management between city planning and Bureau and Safety. And now this new model is going to be broadened to include other departments who will be co-located and centralized over at Figueroa. They've added engineering, they have added DWP, they're talking to other departments to come in to be part of the group. So when a developer comes in, they almost have a cradle-to-grave service, which they would pay for, that would help guide them through the various stages they need to embark on. So 12 to 2 may not have worked, but we are moving closer to getting at least 4 or 5 to 6 of these departments to all work together as a team under a common direction in the case management office.
As we go through ITA's adjustments and looking at different methods on a citywide basis, is ITA folded into that discussion?
Can you sort of reshape what you're trying to get at?
Well, ITA is the spine, if you will, the main central.
The IT system, yes.
And so as we look at how we communicate
Right.
with different departments, they each have their own systems.
Right,
And
right.
how you manage and process information forms.
Okay.
Is that going to be part of that
Yes.
discussion?
Yeah, we're going to talk about technology in just a minute. I
Okay.
can fast forward. Let me just quickly finish on culture. There's the team, the implementation improvement team actually looked at the work culture, the one-stop shops, and how they could set common customer service standards and training programs, and also work on morale. The interest in morale was much more closely aligned with team incentives and team recognition than the others. So let's move to technology, since you raised that good question, Councilman Reyes. We looked at both technology and process improvements, and many of the process improvements have to occur in conjunction with technology. Some of the process improvements should be made regardless of the technology. But in terms of technology, there were some very basic principles we set forth. One is there should be one citywide seamless development services system. It should have a common portal, so that when someone comes on, they don't have to know, gee, I have to go to the website for building and service for this information, then I have to go to planning for this information, then I have to go to the Bureau of Engineering for yet another set of information. They should be able to log on, similar to how you do with Travelocity or TurboTax. They can fill out a common application. It's given one universal federated ID number, and their project can be tracked throughout the city. Now, the city departments have various stages of legacy systems that have been developed over the years. Some systems are in greater need of immediate updating than others. What's being proposed is an enterprise service bus, and the easiest way I can describe it, it's like an extension cord box where different software can plug into it. And so the various city departments can plug into this, but yet by having a shared number that would be translated within each of their systems, we can track projects. The other part of it will be to first enhance and update the software for permitted entitlement services and to move towards electronic submission, which would be a major change in terms of how documents and data are received. So those are some of the big technology solutions. They've already started on this with a project called Build LA, and what our team with Wolpert did was really validate that they're on the right track. Now, to talk about some of the process improvements, one of the big ones has to do with performance measurement. And when Wolpert went through and they flowcharted the 43 processes, what they found was in each of the departments or organizational silos, there was a logical reason why they did the work the way they did. It wasn't necessarily best practices, but it made sense. The biggest gaps occurred in two areas. One was backlogs, and part of that's due to the staffing shortages and furloughs, and the other one had to do with interdepartmental handoffs. So there's a series of performance measurements that are looking at those specific things. There are a number of other process improvements, such as building process roadmaps. So just like in TurboTax, you fill out a common application, it tells you what forms you need to complete, it populates the field with the common information. We also want to come up with ways to improve report production. So, for example, letters of decision, there should be standard paragraphs that can be used for populating the letters so they can be turned around in a timely way within 14 days. We also want to reduce the customer as the courier. I don't know how many of you have been over to Figueroa or up to Van Nuys or the West LA office or down to San Pedro, but you see people hauling in rolls and rolls and rolls of plans. And if they're changed, they have to bring in a new set of paper copy. And so we want to look at that, and technology will obviously help with that upgrade. The final action plan and process improvement has to do with B permits, and this is really using the Bureau of Engineering B status cards to track it, not just within engineering, but also with the other bureaus in Public Works and the Department of Transportation. Last but not least is finance. This is the last action plan. And again, we weren't going to look at this area, but when we got into the study within a month, it was very clear to us if we didn't look at the finance, you wouldn't be able to afford any of these changes. So there are two parts to it. One is payment simplification, which the users want. They would like to have a single cashiering system. There are currently two. And the other one is to be more consistent and move towards a full cost recovery process for all departments that are providing development services. So what we've done is we've built 9 action plans, and you've got the little flow chart or strategy map that if we have the financial resources, we can invest in the technology we need, we can make the process improvements, we can help change the work culture and do the training to work with the new technology and the processes to achieve timely and complete response. Why do we want timely, complete response? It has to be done in the context of accountable development, sustainable communities, so we can be a world-class city, the best place to live, work, and visit. Now, the final comment I want to go over is the implementation plan, because come July 1st, we deliver the final strategic plan. It will have been vetted by the various departments that are involved, as well as the mayor's office and other stakeholders. But it becomes the city's document. It is a document for the department heads to make a reality. So we spent a lot of time in the last 6 weeks working with the steering committee about how can we preserve this process so when the consultant leaves, change happens. So we're proposing that any department, they can remain as their own department, but if they're providing a shared development service, they're part of what we call the Development Services Collaborative. It cuts across organizational lines. It will be headed by a Development Services Cabinet, and this cabinet would consist of the department heads that were involved with the steering committee. So it would, again, be building and safety, planning, transportation, water and power, Bureau of Engineering. They would meet monthly. In addition to monitoring the implementation of the action plans, they should also resolve any operational issues that are happening across departments, because they will be the one vision that has the bigger picture. They can invite in other departments to comment and to share their thoughts on how to make it better. In addition, we would like to have The Development Reform Advisory Committee, which is an industry group, continued. We'd like the membership to be expanded to add some expertise that's currently not on it, particularly in the areas of CEQA, transportation, large development, and those areas. We'd like it to be renamed the Development Industry Advisory Committee to reflect more of an ongoing involvement. We also have talked with the Plan Check NC about using them as an advisory group since they represent all the land use committees of the neighborhood councils as another advisory group from the community perspective. Now, what are the shared services that will be under them? The shared services would include the technology, Build LA. DBS, Building and Safety, would be assigned as the lead department to make it happen, but it's a shared service for all development services activities. Obviously, the construction service centers, the land development committee I talked about earlier, common cashiering, the outreach in terms of public information, development services case management, which is the large consolidation, and then the implementation improvement teams to help make the actions a reality. So that would be the umbrella organization. And that gives you an overview.
And a lot of input has created, I think, a product that reflects many different interests and how we identify our sense of what we do first. So every stakeholder has their position. Certain groups want to preserve, others want to create opportunities, and so when we look at the 15 council members and the one mayor, and we look at work product, my assumption is that this last group, this last team you spoke of,
Right.
would be in a position to report to the council in as much as how they see priorities, how they see work program. Knowing very well that you have the mayor's office and executive arm also moving in its direction, and we would hope that there's a convergence of
Yes.
commonality somewhere.
Yes.
And so where do you see that expression occur?
Okay, we build it in a couple of ways. One is the Development Services Cabinet should report to Plum quarterly. We also are requesting that the chair of Plum and the City Council office from Plum, and also the planning deputy for the council president, attend not only the DC cabinet meetings, but also be invited to the development industry advisory committees and any meetings with Plan Check NC. We also are planning to include the CLA and the CAO at least in the December meeting and the June meeting, so they can get a mid-year update. So any strategic initiatives that have budgetary implications, they would be kept abreast, and also year-end so that they could hear progress made and what are the plans for moving forward each year.
So eventually, I would assume, and I know this is going to be about experience and how we move
Right.
forward and we get the kinks out as we move forward.
Right.
But I'm looking forward to a time where, let's say we have a federally subsidized development scenario that has certain timelines, but yet we have other time frames that might prolong it, might even kill it, because we're not meeting certain cycles. And those are the kinds of tensions, if you will, that I think will arise to the surface as we go through this.
So, good question, particularly given the hard financial times. What we ask for the Development Services Cabinet to do is to adopt the action plans in concept. Because you're right, come year 2, who knows what might happen in terms of the financial situation. It may prolong the timelines. Or they may embark on something and come up with a smarter way to make it happen. So these action plans have to be living documents that are looked at the end of each year. What has been accomplished? What did we learn? How do we revise them? The report itself, what you have there is Volume 1, which is really the strategic plan with a summary of the action plans. There's a Volume 2 that's even longer that has the detailed action plans. And those are written, they asked us to put them in Excel so that they can change them on a real-time basis. They can obviously quickly identify what we have to do in year 1, year 2, year 3.
I think in terms of timing, I'll work with the CLA to see if there are any motions or policy type language that we need to consider. Looking at calendars, my assumption is that we'll be seeing this in council before you leave at the end of June? Is that how are we contemplating this?
Okay, we were not scheduled to meet before before City Council.
Okay.
The strategic plan is a document for the department heads and this development services collaborative to make a reality. If they would like a presentation, we'd be happy to share it.
Okay.
But it's an internal, sort of like business plan document.
Got you. I think I'd love to hear their opinion on this, Councilmember. I think for our colleagues to understand the proactivity that's occurring in building and safety and planning in the context of all the cutbacks, in the context of opportunities that this slowdown has availed itself to, is something that perhaps we would like to share with our colleagues on the council floor.
Yes, I think all council members are asked at one point or another, what is the city doing to improve its development process? And I think it would be helpful to the other council members to hear this and see what we are doing. So certainly, I think we should, absolutely should get before the full council.
If we can't squeeze it in before the end of the contract, we'll see if we can set that up.
I'm more than happy to do that, and I would also encourage that the various members of the cabinet help with the presentation, because that would show the ownership that they have of the entire plan.
Go ahead. One last point I want to make is, we spoke of this earlier, is, and I know it's not within the context, parameters and scope of this work, but one of my, to put this, levels of accomplishment, and based on how much traction we get from this report, will be our ability as a municipal corporation to see ourselves in a manner in which we can effectuate the generation of revenue, understanding our land use and planning, policy development, opportunities around transit-oriented districts, around property we own and control as a city, looking at the emergence of different areas that I see in the future, such as all the development scenarios that are spoken to around the harbor, the development scenarios around the train stations, development scenarios around and along the Los Angeles River, major transit-oriented districts that have the ability to move forward because of consensus building, because of community plans, because of transparency. We create these efficiencies and actually start enlarging the city pie, its revenue base.
Right.
So we're not just continually cutting programs and core services,
I agree.
but actually going in a direction where we're actually leveraging our abilities, our capacities as a municipal corporation. And that, to me, is going to be one of the prime indicators of how successful and effective this step will be in the future, and have a lot of confidence we'll get there. But that's what I'm looking for in my last 2 years in this office, and pushing in a direction. And I know Councilmember Rizar is aware of this. We've already added on the budget, or in the budget, the ability to hire the skill sets to understand real estate management, real estate asset development, and public-private partnerships. I know we're going down that road with CAO. So this will go hand in hand with that whole effort. But so I just want to make that very clear, that that to me is one of the indicators, if you will, of how effective this is going to be.
I think that's a good indicator, and I think for that very point is why it's important that CRA be part of the cabinet.
Right.
Because they are part of those linchpins in terms of economic development. And I had met with them mid-morning today and had talked about that whole opportunity in terms of public-private sector partnership, and what are some of the other models that are used in other governments and universities in the state.
And I still want to make sure we protect our neighborhoods, we protect our historic corridors, our overlays. There's no way I'm trying to push for changing that whole level of comfort that we right now have with our overlays. So I just want to make sure that's on the record before it gets misinterpreted what I just said. Councilmember?
Yes, last week we were in council in Plum, and there was I forget what type of project it was, and this person mentioned that they do these types of projects nationally. I think it was either apartment complexes or condos. And I asked them how long did it take them to get here. They said 5 years. from inception, and they said they do these nationally, and then Illinois took them a year and a half to do the same type of project. Today we are presented with a number of strategic initiatives in the strategic plan that will help us make things more predictable, more efficient, hopefully cut down in time while still allowing the public input and not doing away with the public's participation. In all these initiatives, what do you think is our biggest bang for our buck? What is the biggest impediment to have timely applications go through the process? And in your recommendations, you have a number of these initiatives. Are you recommending them as we go at them simultaneously, or are there some that you think we should tackle first before others? So first, which is the biggest impediment to have a timely application go through the process? And second, of all these recommendations, are you presenting them to how should we address them, simultaneously or do some before others?
Yeah, actually, the strategic plan does a very thoughtful staging of each of the recommendations.
Okay.
And part of the balance has to do with how much also can a department actually put on their plate. So city planning has some very big initiatives, but there are some specific things that they can have released much sooner. Building and safety, same things. When you talk about the two biggest things that probably would make the most dramatic change in terms of the City of LA, one is technology, and that's going to cost you around $15 million. The good news is they've started, and we seem to, during the last 6 months, arrived at a good shared vision of how that technology could work across departments. It was very interesting when we first started because each department didn't want to have a common case number or project number because they prefer their own numbering system. When it became clear we could have a federated ID number so we could track a case regardless of what the numbering systems might be within the departments and they could keep their own individual numbers, it actually brought a lot of relief. When we talked about sharing a common database and doing many of these other things, the technology will help bring the departments together so you can track cases and be accountable and turn them around faster. I think for the major developers, in a short term, this case management office, Development Services Case Management Office that will be in Figueroa, will help them because it's a hand-holding process where if a developer is from outside of the city and they don't know the system, there will be a way that they can actually pay for services. They'll have the expertise of the different departments around the table and will help tell them how they work through the system. If there are problems with their projects, they'll know that information early on. It's going to be opened in July as an official opening. They've been doing sort of a soft opening during May and June to get the kinks worked out. So that'll be a big one. I know the community plans are very important, and I don't mean to any way play them down. But based on our research of best practices, the comprehensive zone code reform probably has done the most to help the cities of Chicago, Miami, Philadelphia, to help move their community plans so there's greater clarity of what the zoning codes are, what can be built, and a common vision. And they're much more focused on terms of what the streetscape should look like, the kinds of appearances, how people would get there by transportation, the pedestrian-friendly nature. It's a much more 21st century look in terms of zoning codes. So if you bring your community plan up to date and you're still working with 1946 principles in terms of zoning codes, you still are going to have a disconnect. So I think that that's a very powerful change.
In the development process, the thing that gives us timelines is most of those are in the zoning code, or are those internal administrative, or do we even, does that make a difference? Looking at the zoning code and updating how long things should take us internally, like when we should get back to the applicant, that's in the zoning code, most of those timelines, correct?
Correct. And it's not just, I guess, like they'll say 75 days we have to act, and there's maybe a penalty or some other remedy if you don't act. It's really the structure of the code and the way that it's exception-based. So in order to get a high-rise downtown, we treat it like a suburban single-family home in terms of a zoning perspective. We require a ton of discretionary actions that normally for a project you want that has the right infrastructure and density allowed in the regional growth area, you wouldn't have those types of restrictions on those pieces of land. But but because of our old zoning patterns and old zoning code that hasn't been updated in a number of years, it's difficult for us to process those entitlements because of the number of additional findings, the number of studies, but it also puts the developer at a disadvantage if there is any opposition or litigation from competitors or from any other interested parties.
Okay, thank you. On CEQA, understanding that we have to update our own guidelines to fit with the state laws, how much of this will depend upon us changing state laws? As we know, there's a effort underway in the state level to update our CEQA rules, and for good or bad, that's being met with some resistance from environmentalists that probably don't want some of those touched, but fact of the matter is that at the state level they should be looked upon again. How much does the state CEQA rules inhibit us from moving forward on some of these efficient changes we want to make?
Actually, it's a very good question. The Development Reform Advisory Committee are involved with many associations in the City of LA, and they are working on the state CEQA reform initiative. We defined our scope in terms of what the City of LA could do, what individual departments could do. So the implementation improvement team was made up of CEQA experts within city planning, and there was a feeling that at least what we should do is make our processes work with the current CEQA, be very aware of what the state changes will be, and make sure they're in alignment. A simple example is when there was an update to the state guidelines and thresholds before, the city had their own local ones, and they decided a number of years ago that they should be in alignment and they would adopt the state level. They forgot to unadopt the local. So they both exist and they're in conflict with each other. And this creates confusion. Mm-hmm. So even simple things like that can bring about some immediate change. And I don't want you to think in any way that only the big technology things and only the big zoning code reform and only the big new case management office are going to be the dramatic changes. The strategic action plans have lots of little things that incrementally add up to improvements. The other thing we want to do is create a culture of people working smart and thinking smart about what are new and better ways of doing our work, and to talk to each other. An example is, it used to be, probably still is, but we're trying to change this, that Public Works would go over the plans and indicate where the street light should go, where the Department of Transportation would say where the curb should go, where the light should go. Urban Forestry would put in the trees, and then they'd send it over to fire department, who would then populate with the fire hydrants. And maybe trees had to be moved. So then the developer would have to carry these plans back to Urban Forestry saying, I have to put a fire hydrant there, can we move the trees around? Simple solutions like, let the fire department show where the hydrants go. Then you populate it with street lights. So there are lots of little things like that that just will help with the timing. The other thing, which is very exciting to me about the Land Development Committee, is when we talk to more departments about it, they get excited. So for example, I met with the department head from street lighting last week, and he said, a lot of developers forget that only 1/3 of our streets have street lights. Whenever there's development, there's probably a requirement for street lighting, and that can take 4.5 months and could cost a homeowner $20,000. So we talked about ways that any project people can know early on when they apply that this is something they need to do. They would like to be present at the case management office when a developer is coming so they can alert them to this need so they can plan and anticipate it. So a lot of it is just getting decisions made early in the process. So if a project is a good project, it can move ahead in a timely way. If it's a bad project, let's kill it early. Let's not give it a slow, painful death of years.
My final question, Mr. Chair, is there a need to differentiate up front the types of projects that are being proposed? For example, small restaurant versus a large retail center, NFL stadium versus small mom and pop shop restaurant in these processes, or is that part of the discussion, or are we should it be part of the discussion?
Yeah, obviously if you're a large developer and you're in LA, you can hire your expediters and your consultants to help you. And we know the case management office has criteria in terms of what projects are eligible. But there will be small projects and medium-sized projects that may not need to go through something that complex. So there is an action plan under the process improvements that's called consultant services, and it's similar to what the County of Los Angeles does, where you pay a fee, and for an hourly fee, you can sit down with planning and a couple other departments, and they go over your project, they help educate you on what you need to do. So it doesn't replace the public information counter, but if people need a lot more information on their specific project, it gives them a means to have it without having to go to the more sophisticated case management office.
Okay, thank you.
And you do know of the Restaurant Express program.
I think one of the key elements here in terms of seeing this change occur is the role of the policymaker in terms of language, potential ordinances, regulatory standards that begins to get a little complicated, that might fit in Venice but doesn't fit in the Valley, but doesn't fit in Boyle Heights or Lincoln Heights. So where in the study do we start seeing that level of proactivity? Are you going to recommend language or identify policy concerns that reflects the discretion of the council in terms of the policymaker looking at this body of work? Do we have that in front of us as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the city council offices know your communities. You know your constituents, you know your stakeholders. The community plans, the city council offices have to feel comfortable that this is being responsive, and city planning needs to work closely with your offices and with your stakeholders. I would also argue, given that a community plan has at least a 10-year life, that you want a community plan that makes sense for the community going forward.
But if we drill down to the zoning code book level
Yeah, we did
language.
not get down to the zoning code book other than spending enough time with it to know that it's probably time to do reform. If you look at the new way of thinking about zoning code reform, one of the models out there is form-based. And we're thinking probably the City of LA is going to be some kind of a hybrid because of your history.
I'm sorry, what based?
It's called form-based, and what it does is...
Form-based.
Form. So you look at the form of the community. And it actually, one model sort of has different templates based on density. So you really define the zones and the codes linked to zero density, pasture land, all the way up to high urban. You still can preserve easily the single-family home dwellings. You can look at the mixed-use kind of an area. The hybrids is sort of preserving the things that work within the city and then overlaying them. And I know there was a lot of enthusiasm on our implementation improvement team for what Denver has been doing with contextual new zone code models. We are not being prescriptive of what's the best model. In fact, the phase one is to do a lot of community outreach and to really think through what's the right model to use for the City of LA, and to also then, when you begin to develop these, to engage the community in defining what the look and the feel of the community should be.
Or perhaps have a range of options that fits within certain areas, because it's
Absolutely.
not a one-size-fits-all
It
situation.
is not. And any community plan, as you know, is the size of most U.S. cities.
Right?
So-
Or there's 2 or 3 cities. I thank you for your hard work. I know it's been a long haul, and it must have been quite an adventure.
We've had a great team, and the city's been wonderful to work with.
I
And
expect a novel to come out of this, some series of sorts. No, just kidding. But Bud or Michael, would you like to contribute any comments or observations at all?
I'll just make a quick comment. On behalf of Bud Overham from the Department of Building and Safety and myself, I'd like to thank Gayla and her team for working with us. I think what's unique about this study is its focus on implementation, but also the way they worked with stakeholders, whether it's the development community, the various neighborhood councils we spoke with, our own internal staff. There's a lot of energy and excitement behind this plan, and so it's not something that will collect dust on the shelf, but really something that will guide us not only for future budget years, but as we strategically look how to run our departments, what things to work on, what to communicate with the council in terms of helping us to make the process kind of a first and best in class process. So we'll have other cities coming to Los Angeles, especially for the APA conference next year, asking us how can they kind of follow the same type of model. So that's what we're looking for.
Well, again, I want to say it's been a significant step in trying to understand what restructure means for the city and how we move as a city. And going back to the, I think it was Ken Topping back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had the Zucker report, and then we had the Dan Garcia report. So I've lived through 20 years of reports, and I've seen some of these changes be real, and others we try. I'm hoping, for the sake of the survival of the city and how we move forward and as a built-out city, that we can get real traction. I think we have a lot of the tools now in the toolbox. And I thank you and your team, Bob, for your hard work, and I look forward to working with you. And we'll have a follow-up discussion to see if we can schedule maybe a 20-minute presentation or a 15-minute presentation to the council so they can see what we're doing, and perhaps bring in the chorus of folks that you've been working with already and let them know what they went through as the constituents of my colleagues on the council.
I think that would be a very wise move.
Thank you very much.
And I thank you for making the suggestion.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that was a note and file, as much as the information is submitted for the purposes of informing the committee and maybe taking the next steps. And last but not least, Roberto?
That would be item 3, council members. It's a motion, Reyes Rosenthal. It's requesting planning and DOT to report back to this committee in a week concerning the regional housing needs assessment process. And I believe staff is present.
All right, come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Claire Bowen from Los Angeles Department of City Planning, and I'm here today just to give you a brief report on Council File 110961, and I'm offering to come back probably next week with a more detailed report. But I wanted to basically just describe to you what the RENA process is and where we are with that, and what we're suggesting, how we move forward. Just a brief background: in order to ensure a fair and equitable distribution of affordable housing statewide, the Southern California Association of Governments and the California Department of Housing and Community Development are currently working together to develop a methodology to identify what the region's allocation of affordable housing capacity needs to be. They're currently planning to have that allocation number developed and identified by April 2012. That number is called the RENA, or the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So we're really at the very beginning of that process, and basically at the beginning we're offered an opportunity to what they call accept delegation, which means we could partner with another member of the region and form our own sub-region and identify perhaps our own target RENA number. We're asked again to provide a letter of intent to SCAG by the end of this month, which doesn't commit us to accepting delegation, but just expresses an interest of intent of perhaps pursuing that. Again, we'll come back next week with a full report. We have reached out to the city of San Fernando to see if they're willing to partner with us and be a sub-region. We did partner with them the last time that we did ARENA, so we're looking forward to engaging in that conversation, hopefully have information back from them next week. That will then, if we do each city provide a letter of intent, we would then work together over the summer to identify what would be the pros and cons of the city accepting delegation, and we have to then prepare a resolution by the city council for SCAG by the end of this summer if we do decide to move forward and accept delegation.
I think it's a critical piece of information. We need to figure out how to get more, for lack of a better word, interest or focus on from our city council on this process. Do you happen to know what's the percentage of votes we have in SCAG? If, let's say, there's a miracle and 15 council members show up to SCAG at one time, and we all needed to vote on a matter. What percentage do we take up in the voting body? Do we know?
Is my colleague
Mike?
Miles Mitchell here from Department of Transportation? Miles
That
is
thought alone makes Mike smile.
Miles is the city's representative to the SCAG.
Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Miles Mitchell with LADOT. That's an intriguing question. I'm not sure, but I think the Regional Council has approximately 80 members.
80, so we have 15 votes?
We have 15. I think the mayor, too, so that's
16.
16. And then we'll have allies.
Right.
So, particularly in LA County, I think we'll have some allies. And maybe San Gabriel Valley. And so we'll be
Well, I'm going to pose that question in council when this comes to us in a week. So just to get you ready.
Okay. I like that assignment. Okay.
But what I want to do is just share with my colleagues the level of influence this city could have in the region, given the amount of mass we take up on sheer geography and volume, and impact in infrastructure, and figure out a way to get a stronger focus. Did we have any luck with the draft letter for San Fernando? No?
We haven't heard back from the city of San Fernando, so we haven't prepared that report.
Great.
Letter.
So, Councilman Ruiz, I wanted to bring this forward so we can have this in the council. RENA is truly one of those, how can I put this? It creates a context for how we define where housing should go. And so we could find ourselves being dumped on, or we can look at how we create a balance and how we move different levels of housing types, and density. And so that's what is in front of us. And that connects to the transportation, the connection to our ability to push ourselves for funding at a regional level. And it goes through a lot of different layers. So I just thought we'd bring this forward and appreciate. I know Phyllis Winger back there did a lot of work with Councilman Burnson. I think he was the president one time, wasn't he? And at SCAG. And so we have a lot of experience here and wisdom, and hopefully we can get this focused, and we'll have a presentation ready for the council, right, when it comes to the council. When is it scheduled? Do we know, Chris?
Well, first, the planning department and DOT have to prepare the report, Councilman. So I think you were going to give them a week.
Okay.
And subsequent to that, it will go to the council.
So maybe I should just go to the directive then? Unless there are any questions, councilors? We can do is refer this to the planning department and the Department of Transportation, and request a report with recommendations in 1 week concerning the regional housing needs assessment, RENA, process and acceptance of delegation and other RENA policy issues affecting the city. So we have a short window.
And I think what we're prepared to do, because really all we need to do by the end of June is provide the letter of intent, and the letter of intent doesn't obligate us to pursue the delegation. I think we're going to want to take a little bit more time in the month of July to really work through what are the pros and cons of the city accepting delegation. So I think we have a short window in front of us right now, which I think we can easily meet if the city of San Fernando agrees to move forward with the letter of intent, and we can just do that as a department. And then we'll want to work, more cohesively with everybody else to determine whether we want to actually accept delegation. So there's a lot of pros and cons in doing so, and we want to be very thoughtful in that decision.
Okay, so we'll do this directive. We'll keep our options open, put the draft together, then we'll move it from there, and hopefully council will agree and have that flexibility that we spoke of earlier.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so that'd be the direction of this council, this committee. Anything else, Roberto?
Public comment.
Anybody have a public comment? See all the waves of people out there saying that. Okay. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.